During a live broadcast in Los Angeles, the entire studio watched as the American host leaned forward, mimicked the elderly sheikh's Arabic accent, and burst into laughter that echoed through the microphones. The audience laughed along, and the cameras zoomed in on the serene expression of the religious man as he endured the humiliation with dignity. "Say it like that again, sheikh. The audience loves it," the host teased, forcing a smile. The sheikh lowered his gaze, breathed slowly, and stayed silent. The disrespect was right there, exposed to millions. But before the host could continue the mockery, a sharp cracking sound echoed above the stage lights. The ceiling trembled. A piece of the metal structure broke loose and fell just inches from the host, hitting the floor with enough force to make the entire studio shudder. The audience gasped in unison. Technicians stepped back. The microphone captured the sound of the impact and the shaky breathing of the host, who froze in front of the camera. And all of it, every second, remained recorded live. Before continuing, make sure you're subscribed and tell in the comments which city you're watching from. Hours before stepping into the studio in Los Angeles, Sheikh Ahmad Al-Karim began his day as he always did in his simple routine. In the small apartment where he lived, the early morning light barely touched the walls when he rose for prayer. He moved calmly, as someone who carried decades of discipline in body and soul. After Fajr, he prepared a mild tea, opened a worn book of supplications, and spent a few minutes teaching verses to two young men who visited him daily to learn adab and patience. Despite his advanced age, Ahmad maintained a constant habit, listening more than he spoke. The entire neighborhood knew him as someone who advised gently, always avoiding harsh judgment, always offering a soft smile before each word. That morning seemed no different from the rest, until the moment he received the call from the network inviting him to appear in a live interview. He stayed silent for long seconds. "Do they want to hear me? Or use me?" he asked himself, running his fingers over the wooden beads of his tasbih. The young men beside him encouraged him. "Sheikh, maybe it's a chance to show Islam truthfully. Maybe someone out there needs your calm." Ahmad smiled, but his eyes revealed deep hesitation. He knew the American television world well. They often sought spectacle, not dialogue. Still, he believed that every chance to share wisdom was an act of spiritual responsibility. After reflecting, he accepted the invitation. If Allah wills, let it be for benefit, not humiliation. Before leaving, he folded his cloak carefully, took another sip of tea, and closed the door with the stillness of someone who carried faith, yet did not ignore the weight of the unknown awaiting him. The ride to the studio happened in silence. The car provided by the network crossed busy Los Angeles streets, while Sheikh Ahmad watched the city waking up amid honking bright signs and rush. As he stepped out at the main entrance, he held his tasbih firmly and walked slowly toward the reception. The environment was cold, modern, filled with screens displaying news, advertisements, and smiling faces. Nothing there matched the serenity he carried. A production assistant greeted him with a rehearsed smile. "Sheikh Ahmad, the host is excited for the interview." The sentence sounded polite, but her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. He noticed, but said nothing. He simply replied, "May it be a conversation of benefit." As they walked down the hallway, two technicians adjusting cables exchanged glances and whispered something. Ahmad didn't hear clearly, but he caught the discreet laughter behind him. In the dressing room, the makeup artist was arranging brushes, and not realizing he was already at the door, commented to a colleague, "It's going to be hard to make this look work on TV. He looks like he came from another era." Her colleague replied, laughing, "The host is going to have fun today." Ahmad entered, greeted them kindly, and sat down. Their hands froze for a moment, not out of fear but embarrassment. He pretended not to notice. He let the makeup artist do her work and didn't complain about anything. Minutes later, a knock on the door. The host walked in, a tall man with an oversized smile and a showman's aura. He extended his hand dramatically, as if he were greeting some exotic attraction. "Sheikh, we finally meet. I heard you're an expert in infinite calm." The sarcastic tone was obvious. Ahmad responded peacefully, "Peace comes from the heart, not from pretty phrases." The host tilted his head, still smiling, but with clear disdain in his eyes. "Let's see if all that peace survives on air," he said, winking at the makeup artist as if sharing an inside joke. As they left the dressing room and walked down the hallway toward the main studio, something unexpected happened. The lights above the walkway flickered twice. Technicians looked up, puzzled. One of them murmured, "That shouldn't be happening today. We replaced the wiring yesterday." Another replied, "Leave it. Just follow the script." The sheikh sensed the unease but didn't comment. He simply kept walking steadily. Upon entering the stage, he saw the bright set, the audience seated and a line of cameras ready. The host adjusted his microphone, turned to the team, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Get ready. Tonight I'm getting some good laughs out of this gentleman." The silence that followed wasn't approval. It was shock. The crew, even used to exaggerations, wasn't expecting that tone before a serious broadcast. That was the first moment everyone realized something in that interview was about to spiral out of control. The red studio lights switched on, signaling that the show was officially live. The opening theme echoed through the room, and the host immediately adopted the energetic posture that had made him famous. "Good evening, America. Tonight we have a special guest," he said, stressing the last word with irony. Sheikh Ahmad, seated beside him, bowed his head slightly in greeting. "May peace be upon everyone." The host smiled theatrically. "Look at that, starting with poetry already." The audience laughed. Without giving him space, the host launched the first interruption. "Sheikh, they say you teach people how to stay calm, but tell me, with that accent, how does anyone understand anything?" Laughter echoed again. The camera zoomed in on the religious man's face. His eyes lowered for a second, like someone trying to preserve dignity in the middle of an attack. "Understanding," Ahmad replied in a quiet voice, "comes to those who want to listen." But the host wasn't interested in listening. He suddenly stood up from his chair and, in front of millions of viewers, imitated the prayer posture, bending his body in exaggerated movements. "Is it like this? Like head on the little rug?" The audience burst into laughter. Some applauded, others just watched, uncomfortable. Ahmad remained seated, his hands resting on his knee, steady like someone who already knew the bitterness of human ignorance. His face showed serenity, but his eyes revealed a silent pain, the pain of seeing something sacred turned into cheap entertainment. The host continued, "And tell us, do you really believe millions of people stop to pray 5 times a day? 5. I can barely wake up for work." He looked at the audience, seeking approval, and the crowd responded with more laughter. One of the camera operators looked away, uncomfortable. A production assistant bit her lip, hesitating to interfere. Even so, the broadcast continued, and the host seemed increasingly excited by his own provocations. But among the rows of the audience, one person acted differently. A young woman with glasses, seated discreetly on the side, slowly lifted her phone, hiding it inside the long sleeves of her blouse. Her eyes were focused on the sheikh, not the host. She pressed the record button carefully, trying not to draw attention. Meanwhile, the host leaned in for another joke. "Maybe you can teach the audience how to pray live. Who knows, we might go viral?" Ahmad's expression didn't change. Faith is not entertainment. The host spread his arms theatrically. "Everything is entertainment here, my friend, even you." At that moment, the first invisible crack in the studio's atmosphere formed. It wasn't physical, yet, but emotional. A boundary had been crossed, and the cameras, the staff, and the audience felt it. And the young woman with the phone kept recording, unaware that her footage would become essential. The show continued, but something in the air seemed different. The atmosphere, once filled with forced laughter and irony, began to gain a strange weight, almost tangible. Technicians exchanged silent glances, as if sensing something that didn't yet have a name. While the host made another joke about the sheikh's way of speaking, a current of air swept through the studio, a cold wind, impossible in a completely closed and climate-controlled environment. The script pages in the assistant's hands fluttered suddenly. The host frowned and looked up, suspicious. "Wait, did you crank up the AC?" he asked irritably. No one answered. On the opposite side of the set, the stage director murmured, "We didn't touch anything." Before anyone could try to explain the impossible, one of the main spotlights flickered. First, a light oscillation, like when power drops for a millisecond. Then, a quick flash that made the audience raise their hands instinctively. The host tried to turn the discomfort into a joke. "Folks, was this building made in 1950? Maybe it's as old as our guest here." Some people laughed, but most remained silent. The atmosphere had shifted, heavier, as if the environment were watching instead of just broadcasting. At that moment, the microphones began cracking. Small, dry pops, sharp clicks, like energy surges interfering with the audio system. The technicians tried adjusting the soundboard, but nothing seemed to fix it. The sheikh, sitting with calm posture, simply closed his eyes for a moment, as if making a silent prayer. His fingers moved across the misbah hidden under his cloak, and his breathing stayed steady, even as the signs multiplied around him. The audience began to grow uneasy. A woman whispered, "This is weird," another commented. "I've never seen these lights fail." While everyone's eyes were on the spotlights, the side camera, used for secondary shots, captured something unusual. The operator, focused on the monitor, widened his eyes. "Director, there's something behind the host." She stepped closer, leaning over him. "What, someone from the crew?" "No, not a person, it's a shadow." He zoomed in slowly. The image showed a dark, undefined silhouette hovering behind the host, in a spot where there was no one, no equipment, no passageway. It seemed to form and dissolve in short intervals, following his speech like a visual echo. The director felt the back of her neck prickle. "Keep filming. Don't switch the main camera yet." Meanwhile, on stage, the host noticed the strange movement among the crew in the back. "What's going on back there? Equipment issue?" No one replied. The light intensity dipped for a second, leaving the studio in an unsettling half-darkness. The audience murmured. The sheikh opened his eyes calmly and observed the room as if he already knew what was about to happen. The camera operator cleared his throat, nervous. "Director, I think this needs to be shown later." In the replay, the shadow, caught only by the side camera, seemed to move exactly in rhythm with the host's voice, as if reacting to his arrogance. And there, on the small monitor, one detail almost went unnoticed. When the host mocked again, the shadow expanded slightly behind him, a movement so quick that only a replay could show it clearly. The studio sank into tension. Realizing the situation was slipping out of control, the director raised her hand and signaled the control room. In seconds, the dry voice of the producer echoed in the host's earpiece. "We're going to break now." He tried to maintain the smile he always used on camera, but his expression faltered. The broadcast was cut abruptly, and the red live sign went dark. Immediately, assistants rushed onto the stage, each with an urgent task. The audience murmured in confusion, unable to understand what was happening. Technicians clustered behind the cameras, opening panels, restarting systems, checking cables. The audio engineer shook his head. "No sense, everything was perfect during the check." Another added, "It's like there's interference, but there's nothing in the studio that could cause this." Meanwhile, the employee who had helped the sheikh when he arrived approached the guest. She was a young woman named Lauren, visibly nervous. She knelt beside his chair, speaking softly so she wouldn't draw attention. "I'm sorry about the host's behavior. He shouldn't have done that." The sheikh lifted his gentle gaze, despite the visible anguish in his eyes. "My daughter, disrespect does not wound the one who remains firm. It only wounds the one who commits it." Lauren took a deep breath, clearly moved by the words. "I've worked here for 5 years. I've never seen the studio react like this. I think he crossed the line." On the other side of the stage, several crew members argued intensely. A technician held the portable monitor, where the footage from the side camera had been recorded. The director watched the image over and over, as if searching for a rational explanation. "It's not dust. It's not a focus issue. And it's not anyone standing back there. I checked the entire studio layout." Another staff member whispered, uneasy, "And it shows up exactly when he starts provoking." His words hung in the air. While everyone tried to understand what they had just witnessed, the sheikh closed his eyes and leaned forward slightly. His fingers moved gently along the misbah hidden beneath his cloak. His breathing slowed. The studio noise, loud and frantic just seconds earlier, began to diminish around him, as if someone were lowering the volume of the room. He recited, in a low voice, a short verse he always repeated during moments of trial. "Inna Allaha ma'a as-sabirin." Allah is with the patient. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible to those farther away, but the employee beside him felt a chill rise through her arms, as if the air had become denser for a moment. Lauren widened her eyes. What was that? There was no wind, no vibration, no shadow this time, just a different silence, heavier, and at the same time calmer. The technicians nearby stopped talking without realizing it, as if the studio had been held by something unseen. The director, still analyzing the captured image, turned slowly when she noticed this sudden shift. "Did you all feel that?" she murmured. A cameraman answered, "Yeah, it feels like someone shut off the chaos." The host, who had gotten up to argue with the production team, froze for a second. He seemed to try ignoring the discomfort tightening inside him, but something in his posture betrayed fear. Real fear, not the irritated bravado he showed on camera. The sheikh opened his eyes and lifted his face with serenity. Lauren watched him as if trying to understand a force she didn't know how to name. "Sheikh, did you say something?" Only a reminder for my soul. When hearts are tested, calm is the first protection. On the opposite side of the studio, one of the producers approached, almost voiceless. The atmosphere changed. Did you all notice? Yes, everyone had noticed. The supplication, brief, gentle, delicate, seemed to have touched something deep. The noise of cables, the agitation of the crew, the audience's tension, everything had slowed down, as if the entire building were breathing differently. The director closed the tablet slowly. Going back on air right now is not safe. But no one knew that the supplication, which had calmed some, had awakened something even greater in the scenes to come. The commercial break felt endless. In the hallways beside the studio, phones rang non-stop, and producers spoke rapidly, trying to reorganize the chaos. At the center of that whirlpool of tension, a discovery began spreading like wildfire, and it had nothing to do with technical failures. An intern, pale, ran into the director's room holding a tablet. "You need to see this, now." She grabbed the device, impatient. It was an internal group chat used by the show's hosts and writers to discuss segments. At the top, a series of messages sent hours before the recording. "Today I'm going to make him go viral. The audience loves when we poke religious people. Mock his accent, that always gets good clips. Make him uncomfortable. The more delicate they are, the easier it is to break them." Farther down, even worse comments encouraging mockery, suggesting offensive jokes, even ideas for improvised bits to embarrass him during the live show. The director took a deep breath, her face filled with indignation. This crossed every possible line. The intern swallowed hard. "And there's more. It leaked." "What do you mean, leaked?" "Someone on the staff took screenshots and posted them. It's already on Twitter, it's blowing up." The director rushed to the studio's side entrance. The audience, even without knowing the details, could already sense something was wrong. Two young people were showing their phones to others, pointing at the notifications popping up on the screen. Host planned to humiliate religious leader on live TV. Leaked screenshots. American network exposes guest for views. Whispers turned into outrage. "This is disgusting. He came here in peace and they did that?" That host went too far. The tension grew like a rising wave, echoing through the closed room as if it had physical weight. Back on stage, the host, once confident, began losing control of his own composure. He paced back and forth, trying to convince the producers it was just humor, but no one was listening anymore. The director approached him firmly. "I need to know if you have anything else planned. This is serious." He raised his hands, trying to appear carefree. This is just entertainment. People like seeing reactions. Reaction is not the same as humiliation." He opened his mouth to reply, but was interrupted by two audience members who stood up and shouted, "We demand respect for the guest. This isn't a show, it's a setup." Security stepped in to try to calm the crowd. The situation was clearly slipping out of anyone's control. Meanwhile, on the other side of the stage, the sheikh remained serene, sitting quietly and watching everything with the same patient gaze as before. It was as if he were accustomed to seeing pride collapse without raising his voice. The host, realizing the mood had turned against him, began to sweat visibly. The makeup artist rushed over to wipe him, but he pushed the professional away impatiently. "Get off me, it's just the heat." It wasn't heat. None of the spotlights aimed at him were at maximum power. The studio temperature hadn't changed. Even so, drops ran down his forehead, slid along the side of his face and soaked the collar of his shirt. His voice wavered. His breathing grew erratic, and for the first time that night he looked upward. The gesture was instinctive, as if he had heard something or sensed it or feared it. The technicians, noticing his movement, followed his gaze. Up among the studio beams, nothing seemed out of place. But the host remained frozen, staring at the ceiling as if something were about to happen. Lauren, still near the sheikh, noticed the sudden shift and whispered, "Is he scared?" The sheikh responded only with compassionate silence, without moving a muscle. The host took a step back, eyes wide, more sweat, more trembling, more tension. He wasn't reacting to the leaked messages, not to the shouts from the audience, not to the outraged staff. He was reacting to something only he seemed to sense in that moment, something coming from above, from some invisible point high in the studio, where no spotlight should emit sound, shadow, or any sign at all. And there he stood, frozen, his face drained of color, staring at the ceiling as if expecting something, anything, to crash down at any second. The atmosphere in the studio had changed completely. The outraged audience, the murmuring staff backstage, the director trying to salvage the show, everything converged toward one point. Everyone wanted to hear the sheikh. Everyone expected him to raise his voice, to condemn the host, to respond firmly after such disrespect. But he remained seated, his back straight, his expression calm, and his eyes filled with a serenity that clashed with the chaos around him. When the director finally approached and asked, almost pleading, "Sheikh, do you want to say anything about what happened?" The entire room held its breath. The host, still trembling, stared at the floor, avoiding everyone's eyes. It felt as if the entire studio awaited a verdict. The sheikh inhaled slowly. His hands rested over the misbah, but he didn't move it. He simply lifted his face, looking at each person there, from the frightened wardrobe assistant to the technician holding the tablet with the leaked images. Then he fixed his eyes on the host, without a trace of resentment. His voice emerged soft, steady, and at the same time profound. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best protector. The words hung in the air, as if they had weight of their own. No microphone cracked, no light flickered, no phone vibrated. The silence that fell over the studio wasn't the usual silence of a technical pause. It was a kind of stillness that seemed to wrap around every person, almost demanding they remain still. Lauren, beside him, felt her chest grow lighter for an instant, as if that supplication had opened something invisible in the room. She touched the collar of her blouse and whispered, "I felt that." The camera operator, used to noise, chatter, and constant instructions, slowly removed his headset, looking around with confusion. The director stepped back, stunned, because even the audience, moments earlier furious, was now quiet, watching the elderly man with a respect no one had anticipated. The host, who minutes before had mocked the sheikh with rehearsed arrogance, now seemed to shrink inside his own clothes. He touched the back of his neck, trying to wipe the sweat, but he couldn't hide the tremor in his fingers. One of the security guards approached him. "Sir, do you want to go to the support room?" The host didn't answer. He just kept staring at the floor, as if afraid to lift his eyes, as if afraid of what he might see. The sheikh's supplication, though brief, caused a strange effect. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confrontation. It was something deeper, as if it had shifted everything inside the studio. The sheikh then added calmly, "A heart that seeks to humiliate another only humiliates itself." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. An older woman in the back placed a hand over her chest. A young man who had come just to watch the recording discreetly wiped away a tear without knowing why. The director's voice faltered as she tried to respond. "Sheikh, you don't want to say anything else?" He answered with a gentle smile. "Allah's justice does not need my voice." Then, as if his words triggered something no one could explain, the entire room seemed to breathe differently. The lighting stabilized. The air grew cooler. Even the ambient noise, once heavy with tension, dissolved into a deep, almost reverent silence. The audio technician murmured to a co-worker, "Did you feel that? It's like even the wires stopped buzzing." Lauren, still kneeling beside the sheikh's chair, stood up slowly. "Sheikh, something changed in here." He merely inclined his head, as if agreeing without needing to elaborate. And in that instant, exactly seconds after the supplication, a deep cracking sound echoed from high above the beams, coming from a place no camera was pointed at. It wasn't a power outage. It wasn't a technical fault. It wasn't ordinary noise. It was a dry, heavy sound that made everyone lift their faces at the same time, as if the studio were about to reveal something no one was prepared to see. The deep crack everyone heard didn't have time to repeat. Only 3 seconds later, a violent crash tore through the studio, so strong that the cameras shook as if a small earthquake had struck. The audience rose instinctively. Some screamed, others stepped back, gripping their seats. From high up on the beams, a heavy section of the set structure, a decorative panel with internal metal bars, broke loose without warning. The piece fell at frightening speed, crashing down exactly over the spot where the host had been minutes earlier, mocking the sheikh. He tried to step back, but the ground seemed to disappear beneath him for a moment. The impact hit the stage with a blunt, cracking thud, so close that splinters of wood and paint struck his pants and shoes. It had missed him by inches. The audience erupted in a collective scream. The camera operators pulled their equipment away. The director covered her mouth, frozen. The host fell to his knees, not from stumbling, but from pure shock. His hands shook as he tried to understand how it could have happened so close, so fast, so impossible to ignore. My God, that almost killed me," he murmured, his voice shattered. Still on his knees, he turned toward the sheikh, who remained seated motionless, his eyes lowered as if making a small, silent supplication. The host dragged himself a few inches, and, in front of the entire studio, and the countless phones now recording again, collapsed into confession. I crossed the line. Sheikh, forgive me. I shouldn't have spoken like that. Shouldn't have mocked. His voice broke, stripped of the sarcasm he flaunted hours earlier. The destroyed panel shed dust, creating a thin mist that reflected the stage lights. Lauren ran to help the sheikh stand, but he lifted only one hand, gently refusing. With steady steps, he approached the host still kneeling. The audience watched in absolute silence, as if afraid to interfere. He placed a hand on the panicked man's shoulder, who recognizes his mistake, has already taken the first step toward forgiveness. The host wept openly. The director tried to reorganize the scene, but no one followed production commands anymore. In that moment, it was no longer a program. It was an event. The technical crew filmed everything, even without knowing whether they should. Several audience members already held their phones up, recording the dramatic unfolding they were witnessing live. A cameraman whispered to another, "This is going to blow up online." It already is. Fun fact, outside, videos recorded seconds after the fall were already spreading through social media. Screams in the studio, the crash, the host collapsing to his knees. Everything was being reposted at alarming speed, and one detail stood out in every recording. The sheikh remained steady, serene, unshaken, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. While dust from the fallen structure still hung in the air, notifications popped up on audience members' phones, displaying breaking headlines. Something supernatural in the studio. Part of ceiling collapses after host mocks religious leader. Millions watched the exact moment of the fall. And there, in the heart of the still-shocked studio, the host sobbed, his hands covering his face, completely surrendered to his own remorse, while the world began shaping its own narrative about what had just happened. The initial chaos that overtook the studio slowly began to reorganize, but now under a new direction, one guided by awareness and the acknowledgement of the injustice committed. Workers, once focused on keeping up with the frantic rhythm of the show, approached the sheikh carefully, almost reverently. Lauren was the first to reach out her hand. "Sheikh, are you all right? Can I help you?" He nodded with a small, serene smile, accepting the gesture only to maintain harmony, and rose slowly. The technical staff cleared a path instinctively, as if only now recognizing the dignity they had overlooked during the entire preparation for the program. The producers, who earlier hid behind screens and headsets, now came forward. The head producer, visibly shaken, bowed his head in an earnest apology. "Sir, we didn't know the host would do that. He went beyond everything that was agreed. On behalf of the network, I ask your forgiveness." The sheikh did not reply with a speech or accusation. He simply closed his eyes for a moment and said, "Insults reveal more about the one who speaks them than about the one who receives them." It was a simple sentence, but the impact was immediate. The staff around him lowered their eyes. Many remembered the jokes they made earlier, the stifled laughter, the whispers. That sentence seemed directed at each of them, yet without condemnation. Meanwhile, backstage, the director spoke on the phone with the network's legal team. The decision was quick, almost unavoidable. The host would be suspended immediately. The news spread through the studio within seconds. 2 security guards escorted him to the internal room, still too shaken to respond. The audience watched everything in silence. However, outside, online, the storm was already fully formed. Clips of the moment the structure fell, the plea for forgiveness, and even the instant the sheikh touched the host's shoulder circulated on every platform. Thousands of comments appeared every minute. "Allah defends those who defend him. This man is pure. I've never seen a studio react like this. What dignity this sheikh has." Some videos hit millions of views in minutes. Hashtags appeared among them. "Respect the sheikh," "Justice." In the studio, Allah is just inside the studio, the director noticed a curious change. People didn't want to leave. Audience members remained silent, waiting for something, not out of spectacle but out of need. A young man raised his hand timidly. "Sheikh, could you say a few words?" Another voice joined, then another, and another, until dozens gently asked with sincere respect, "Speak to us. Teach us something. Say whatever you feel in your heart." It was as if, after witnessing the fall of a physical structure, everyone began seeking the rebuilding of an inner one. The sheikh looked around. He saw eyes desperate for understanding, people shaken by what they had just witnessed, staff members filled with regret, cameras waiting for a gesture of reconciliation, and an audience that no longer wanted entertainment. It wanted truth. And it was precisely this collective desire that made everyone move closer to him, forming a quiet circle, as if awaiting guidance from someone who had remained steady when everything around him collapsed. But his response was still missing. A response that would not only calm the studio, but leave a deep mark on every person who heard him. When the sheikh finally began to speak, only a few sentences were needed for the entire studio to fall into a respectful silence. The cameras, even officially turned off, were pointed at him. It was no longer a show, it was an event that would cross borders. And it did. Within hours, the videos captured by the audience spread across the world. Journalists, influencers, Muslim communities, and even secular pages shared the moment the studio structure collapsed inches from the host. The sheikh's serenity became a symbol, in contrast to the gratuitous aggression he had endured. In Los Angeles, New York, London, Dubai, Johannesburg, and Kuala Lumpur, thousands commented on the clips. Messages appeared in every language. "This man carries light. I've never seen such calm in the face of disrespect. May Allah preserve him." Invitations began flooding the network's inbox, not to interview the host, but to hear the sheikh. Universities requested lectures. Community centers asked for meetings. Young people from various backgrounds sent messages wanting to learn from him about patience, emotional control, and faith in the face of hostility. Outside the studio, a group of university students waited, holding improvised signs with phrases they had just heard live. "Dignity is stronger than mockery. Wisdom does not need to shout." The director, now fully aware of the power of that moment, guided the sheikh to a quieter room so he could rest. As soon as the doors closed, Lauren appeared accompanied by 3 young members of the audience. "Sheikh, they wanted to thank you. They said they had never seen someone react like that." One of the young men, holding his phone against his chest, spoke with a trembling voice. "I always lose my temper when I'm provoked, but you showed me another way." The sheikh smiled softly. "Real strength is not in the quick response, but in the heart that remains firm." Meanwhile, in the administrative wing of the network, the host, still shaken, made an unexpected request. He wanted to speak with the sheikh privately, not to defend himself, not to appear in front of the cameras again, but to ask for forgiveness, away from any public attention. The request was delivered to the director, who walked to the sheikh's room. "He wants to talk to you. Says he needs to apologize properly without an audience." The sheikh nodded, but asked for a few minutes before receiving him. Lauren noticed that he rested his hand over the misbah and closed his eyes, as if searching for something within his own memory. The room remained still. When he opened his eyes, there was something different in his expression. Not surprise, but an old recognition. "Sheikh, are you all right?" Lauren asked. He answered in a low voice, almost a whisper carrying weight. "I've lived something very similar. Many years ago." She frowned, curious. "With someone else who disrespected you?" The sheikh looked away, contemplating some distant point in the room, as if revisiting a deep moment from his youth. An episode no one around him ever imagined existed. And with that silent memory rising in his expression, the people around him prepared to hear something even more transformative than everything that had happened in the studio. When the room grew quiet again, the sheikh took a deep breath and walked down the corridor leading to the studio exit. Night had already fallen over Los Angeles, and the dark sky contrasted with the red lights of antennas and nearby buildings. Each step seemed to dissolve a bit of the weight the day had carried. As he walked, the words repeated across the internet seemed to echo softly around him. Messages of gratitude, regret, reflection. Young people deciding to rethink their behavior. Parents thankful for the example he had given. People of other faiths moved by his calmness and composure. The sheikh stopped for a moment before the glass doors and looked out at the street. The night wind moved the edge of his cloak, and a gentle golden glow from the late sunset still clung to the horizon. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting that deep peace settle over his chest. The memory of everything that had happened, the mockery, the crash, the apology, the collective transformation, brought him no pride, only humility. It was a testimony to something greater than any individual, respect for the sacred, patience in the face of injustice, and the certainty that divine justice always finds its time. As he continued walking calmly, images of the comments flooding the digital world seemed to project themselves in his mind. "I learned never to ridicule someone else's faith." The patience of this man, taught me more than any sermon. Allah honors those who keep their hearts clean. The camera would follow him in his final steps, a simple man walking toward the dusk, carrying the serenity of someone who fully trusts in what is unseen. And with that quiet peace, we end this narrative. If this story brought reflection to your heart, subscribe to continue this path with us, a journey of light, understanding, and spiritual presence. And when you finish, watch the next video to keep deepening the lessons life insists on offering us every day.